Alrighty, everybody. Thanks for clicking on the channel. James Cards FC here. And today I'm starting off with my first of what I hope to do a little bit more of on this channel and bring in some other creators and especially highlighting some that I think need some more attention than what they're currently getting. So today I'm bringing on Seth from Soccer Card Corner. He is a new content creator in the space. I really like the content that he's been putting out. I think he's around 50 subscribers right now. You can correct me if I'm shouting him out a little low there, but I really want to give him some more attention because I think what he's bringing to the market is a good, unique perspective, and his videos I think are really informative. And so, want to shed some light on him. We're going to have a discussion today on a few different things about the market, starting out, strategies, recent market trends, all that sort of stuff. We'll talk about today. And so, I'll go ahead and give Seth a chance to introduce himself and introduce his channel to the people that maybe haven't been able to check it out yet.
Yeah, thanks. I think we're at 57 subscribers as of
There
today.
we go. There we go.
Pretty stoked about that. Yeah, hey everyone, Seth here. Started Soccer Card Corner about a month and a half ago, and really just because I've been immersed in the soccer card market and just wanted to provide not only my own perspective, but just providing more insight into the things that I'm thinking about and the things that I'm doing. So my content's kind of split between two main areas. One is basically like a bankroll challenge, where starting with a $1,000 bankroll and trying to basically flip that into enough money to afford a Messi rookie card. I think luckily, at least right now, the price of that Messi keeps falling. So hopefully it won't be as difficult as we thought. And then the other content is really just like tips and tricks, insights, opinions, just kind of like general market deep dives that are sort of tangentially related to the main content, or just things that I'm kind of thinking about and want to explore a little further. So yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, and so if anybody checks out the type of content I do, I think Seth's is very similar in a way, where it's more slideshow based. You get to do some market analysis, some educational type content, and then you have your general market talk. And he does his series where he focuses on trying to build a bankroll. And I think that sort of stuff is really helpful, especially if you're just starting out in the market and you're trying to pick up on some things you could be doing to sort of advance the capital that you're bringing in. So I think it's a great channel to go ahead and check out. I definitely enjoy watching his videos. And so today we're going to get into this list of subjects that I have on this screen right here. We're going to go through 11 or 12 different things, depending on what comes up to top of mind. But I'll go ahead and start out with just a basic one. If you ever watch the Card Talk guys do their podcast, they always start out with what's on your mind. And so I think that's always a good way to start these podcasts as well. So the date of recording this is August the 12th. So not sure if that's significant at all to what's going on in the hobby. Just depends on, I guess, when we see this video. But yeah, I'll go ahead and start. Seth, what is on your mind currently with the stock card market as of today, August the 12th?
Yeah, and I mean, it's a good question. I think I'm kind of always trying to think, more like macro as far as like, what are the trends in the market? What are the trends in the hobby? Like, what are people focused on? I think with the national just happening, there was obviously a lot of focus on that. I'm sure you could probably provide more insight there. But I think there's also what's happening right now is there's a lot of releases happening. We just had Topps Chrome, UEFA, I think Finest just came out. There's a bunch of other releases slated, and I think those are good in the sense that they drive a lot of hype, especially towards the ultra modern market and a lot of the new like rookie class, the new prospecting class. But it's also interesting to kind of see how the market reacts, especially as with Topps Chrome comes out, we have our 5-10 rookies that everyone's chasing. Well, what happens when we're at Stadium Club or Merlin, and we start to kind of build out the checklist for some of these players, and we see who's scarce versus who's not. So I'm kind of interested to see how that plays out.
Yeah, I think that's always really interesting. And so what we're coming through here in sort of the product release cycle is we've had the tent pole releases. We've had Topps Chrome, a million different variations of Topps Chrome, and we've had Topps Chrome Sapphire. And so now of the standard rookie class that we have for this year, they're premium products, and they're most mainstream products rather have already come out. And so people are chasing those. Baseline prices are being set, which is always really interesting to see where certain players line up in a prospect tiers list based on what prices are being paid for them. And as we move into more of the Topps Finest, Topps Merlin, Stadium Club, those sorts of checklists, this is the time where you can start digging through the checklist and trying to find guys that didn't make it into the Topps Chrome set. Because if they didn't make it into the Topps Chrome set and they're coming up in one of these later sets, there's a pretty good chance this might be the only one or two sets that they're in for the year. And that's a really, really good thing if you're trying to go after somebody that may have a lot of cards out there. So guys like Benjamin Sesko, guys like Gavi, they're probably the two most talked about prospects in this current class. They're going to be in every single set, including Topps Chrome and Topps Chrome Sapphire. So their alternatives on the market is very, very high. There are going to be a lot of Gavi rookies, a lot of Sesko rookies, and so on and so forth. Whereas if you look through the Merlin checklist, you'll find guys like Soleimani from Rennes, I believe, is on that checklist. I don't think he's in any other checklist. The midfielder that Real Madrid just signed is only in the Obsidian checklist, and he hasn't been in any of the other releases. I believe he's also in Merlin, so he has less cards than Gavi and Sesko. So if you're looking for small little plays you can make like that, I think that's always very interesting, especially from a raw to grade perspective when they're not going to have nearly as many slabs on the market as guys like Gavi and Sesko.
Yeah, I was going to bring up Obsidian because I think we have these releases from Panini, and then you'll have releases from Topps, and it's always interesting to see kind of where it all falls out as far as, you know, like the Darwin Nunez phenomenon, where it's like where they're in one but not any of the others, then you can really have some true rarity there.
Yeah, so that's what I've been doing recently is as these checklists get announced, and we just got the full release for Topps Finest, there's 3 or 4 guys that are on the Finest checklist that aren't in any other checklist. The Merlin checklist is already out, even though the product is not out yet. There's even more so on the Merlin side, there's 5 to 10 guys that aren't on any other checklists. So if you're looking to specifically try and make plays on guys that there might not be a lot of eyes on right now, I think those 2 checklists are good places to start. And depending on how they progress through the season, they could start off at a really low entry point right now. So I think it'd be really interesting to take some time. What I do is I just go through the checklist on one screen and I put transfer market on the other screen, and I'll just copy and paste the names across and check out how each of the players are rated in terms of their transfer market value, as well as goals they've scored in lower leagues and stuff like that. So I think that's a fun little process to go through if you're prospect hunting on some of these deeper cut kind of guys. So yeah, that's definitely been on my mind recently is I always have fun looking through those checklists. And so I think we're synced up there in terms of what's on our mind right now in the current hobby.
Yeah, it's the exciting time of year for sure, at least from just action standpoint. And then with all the leagues starting up too, right? Like you actually can start following some of these players and see how they're doing.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. And so I will say the first few weeks of the season are usually more volatile than when you get into the dog days of the season and it's progressing into week 10 through 20 or whatever it is. People really get excited and really focus on what happens in the first couple of weeks. So it's really important, especially for these young, unproven guys, if they have a good first couple of weeks, their markets can change significantly. So for example, Kulusevski for Tottenham Hotspur, he killed it in his first game, right? And so he'd gotten a little bit of hype going into his first game, and then he had a great first game. And now he's got a bunch of hype that's really building. So if he has 2 or 3 more performances, I think given the low amount of cards that he has on the market, he could really see some upwards momentum. That's not a secret at this point. Pretty much anybody in the hobby is talking about him right now, but that's an example of what can happen if you do have a good first few games. Your market can change drastically.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get into our sort of pre-scheduled questions we'll be going through. And so the first one is a very overarching theme, which is having goals in the soccer card market and the importance of that, what those goals are, and understanding what you're trying to do in the market. And so this can change over time. Of course, I think when we all get into the market, we have different goals, or perhaps you get in the market and you have no idea what you're doing. That was pretty much the case for myself when I started the market a few years ago. But I'd love to get your take on the importance you think is that having goals is, and what those current goals are for you.
Yeah. I mean, I think having a goal or goals is just fundamental to what we do in the market because, you know, at least for me, and I would think this would apply more broadly, is that having a goal is sort of like a North Star that helps keep you focused. So like when you're on eBay or when you're on ComC or when you're at a show and you know, there's just so much like stimuli everywhere. Yep. You're not just going after what looks pretty or what's shiny. You have at least some sort of goal that from there you can then build, you know, plans into like how you're going to achieve that goal. And then as you're making purchases or sales, you understand how, okay, buying this card, how does this advance me towards that goal? Or if I sell this card, you know, things like that. I think it helps you like not only know what plays to make, but I think also, and this is something I struggle with, where when I buy a card, even if beforehand I'm like, oh, I'm going to buy this, and if it doubles or whatever, I'll sell it. It's like when I buy it, I'm like, oh, this is my card now. And so I never want to sell them. And I think having goals really helps take a bit of the emotion out of not only who you're buying, but also like then being able to sell those cards as well, because you know this is just a step towards your ultimate goal. And I think, you know, as far as like my goals, I think like my general thesis of the soccer card market is that like I want to have things that I can hold long term. I think just I want like rare, stickers of great players. Those are very expensive. So in order to get there, I need to kind of think through like, okay, how can I build my bankroll in such a way that I can afford these things? But also, I think like longer term, it's just I think there's more, I don't want to say there's more upside long term, but I think there's more like certainty long term and like holding long term. Like I feel I think you said on the recent podcast you were on where it was like you have like you're very positive on like the long term, even though like the short term might be more volatile. That's kind of how I'm thinking about it as well.
Yeah, I mean, so just from a general market perspective, we came from a market that pre 2019 really didn't exist in a mainstream sense. Sure, there were people that collected soccer cards in a very small variety. The Messi 71 Biz and PSA 10 was like less than $5,000 a card. So you fast forward to today or even last year, that's a $300,000 card now. So we're like a legitimate speculative market at this point. It's gone beyond where it was just this little hobby type thing. It's now a very real speculative market. And so a lot can change in that period of time. And so we've seen this massive pullback in things, and things are really starting to try and, well, they're not starting to, but it's trying to level out and figure out what this actually is going to be. And so during this period over the next few months to few years, when we try and figure out what this thing is going to be, I think there could be some pain points. There could also be potential massive upside depending on how many people enter the market, how much money gets pumped in the market, all those different factors. And so over the long term, and I've been very bullish on this, I think if you look at the population reports and compare it to some in other sports, especially if you look at pre-modern and vintage, soccer is just so incredibly low that that should play out long term just based on the interest of the sport, how many people watch the game. I mean, it's by far the biggest sport in the world and the most people are interested in it. So it just makes sense to me that with the population reports being so low in the eventual long term, and I'm talking about 10, 20, 30 years down the road, those things and those factors really play out well. And so that's why I'm so bullish on the market. Whereas in the short term, anybody can make a prediction and nobody really knows what's going to happen. So that's at least my views on the market at this point at a very, very large scale. But getting back to having goals in the market, that really is the most important thing, is because when you come into the market, at least like I came into the market in 2019, I was sort of just buying things that I thought might be interesting to buy. So for example, I was watching Sports Card Investors videos in 2019, and he was talking about silver prisms and optic hollows and all that kind of stuff for basketball and football players. And so being a big FIFA player at the time myself, I just looked at the most popular players in FIFA and bought their silver prisms and optic hollows and that sort of thing, graded them and flipped them and started playing that game. Where most people were doing the basketball thing, I started doing the soccer thing. And so I had a lot of success in that, especially considering how cheap the market was back in 2019. And obviously that changes rapidly as we go to 2020 and 2021. But I didn't really have a goal besides just buying guys that I liked in FIFA and flipping their cards. But as I got more into the market, you start creating goals. Like you see the Messi rookies and the Ronaldo rookies, and you see the Pele Lifa, and you think, oh man, one day I could maybe get into a position where I could afford that. Now that goal is getting way, way further away than it used to be in the past. I mean, I can specifically remember being on one of the Swedish auction sites and having an opportunity to get a somewhat clean copy of an Alifa Pele for like $5,000. And I was like, I don't know if I can do that for $5,000. And now that card is probably worth 50 to 60 grand. So that's one of those big regrets for me. But as you go through the market, you're going to have all kinds of stories like that. I mean, I can look back on things that I'm definitely glad I didn't purchase. I mean, silver prisms for Messi were like 10K at one point. So you win some, you lose some when it comes to that sort of thing. But having a goal in the end really helps guide you through your market decisions. And so my goal at least my main goal right now is to try and enjoy the ultramodern market, because that's really what I do enjoy, is the prospecting aspect of it, the active players in the market, watching performances, things like that is really what appeals to me. And so in order to participate in that market, I do a lot of rod and grading in that market. And then with that, I build a capital source to go after those vintage and pre-modern stuff that I really do enjoy. And I really think those are great long-term holds. So my basic view on the market right now, at least my goal is to take and participate in the ultra-modern side, rod to grade, and then use that to fund the grail type purchases that I'm looking for in pre-modern and vintage. They're the obvious things. Like I would really like a 71 Biz in a high grade. I'd love a Ronaldo in a high grade. I'd love a Pele Lifa at some point, although that's getting way, way further away than I ever thought it would be. There's specific things, like there's some early Ronaldinho issues that never come up, that when they do come up, I'm super interested in getting those. But yeah, I mean, at least right now, I'm just having a lot of fun in the market, trying to play the ultra modern side and then build that into things that I can look at for vintage and pre-modern.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think we're aligned there. I think you mentioned something too, that it's fun to participate in the ultra modern market. And I
Mhm.
think it's important not to lose sight that, this is fun. I mean, yeah, people are trying to make money and we obviously have our own goals, but it's fun. It's fun to grade, it's fun to follow these prospects, it's fun to just be sort of immersed in the market and immersed in the game of soccer. So
Yeah, I mean, I love spending time on transfer market. I love watching specifically curated YouTube videos that make any player look like they're the next Lionel Messi. So I mean, this stuff like that's just fun, and so it's a hobby, I guess, at this point more than it is an actual investment. And I definitely don't look at ultra modern cards as in investments, right? They're more akin to gambling or a hobby. And so instead of buying wax and opening product, I do the thing where I product grade and I look at videos of prospects. I go on transfer market, that sort of thing. So that's just how I enjoy interacting with the market. And I think it's an approach that has served me well in the past and hopefully will serve me well into the future as I still have those goals for trying to get into the vintage and pre-modern grail type territory.
yeah, for sure.
Alrighty, so with that, we'll move on to our second topic here, which is going to be the approach to the soccer card market and then goals in the market, specifically in regard to our channels that we're creating. And so, at least for myself, when I started making videos, I will always remember the criticism I got when I started making my videos is pretty much any person that got on there was like, he's very smart, but he is overly critical about things in the market, and I think that is very fair. That my first few videos, if you go through and you watch them, I have a pretty negative outlook on the market, especially on the ultramodern side in general. And over the past few months, as I grow as a content creator, I've changed it more to trying to assist people as they go through the market, trying to help them figure out what sets they might be interested in, go through the process of how do you grade a card, how do you sell cards, how to participate in the market in probably the most efficient way that you possibly can. And so I've switched my content really from being more this hard focus thing of you need to be investing in pre-modern and vintage and anything else is trash into this is how you can participate in the market. This is how I think you can do it the most efficiently. And these are the things I would look for. And so I think my general goal at this point is to try and build the market in any way I can. I personally have the most fun in the ultramodern side of the market, doing the raw to grade and the flipping and all that sort of aspect that comes with the ultramodern side of the market. Whereas if I was looking at this purely from an investment perspective, I think there's no question you should be targeting vintage and pre-modern instead. But since the most of the activity on the market right now is on the ultramodern side, my videos have started to trend more that way. And I do enjoy making content more in that space as opposed to just saying over and over again, you need to buy Messi, buy Ronaldo, buy Pele, and buy Maradona. Because after the fourth or fifth video, it kind of starts to get more cumbersome as you go through it. But go ahead and talk through what your goals are with your channel and how you view that and as it connects to the market.
Yeah, so I think I've been in the soccer card market, sports card market for a few years now, and have been consuming YouTube content for, about the same amount of time. I think that's how a lot of people kind of understand a bit more about the market, and you kind of get a sense of like where the market, at least where like the mainstream market is trending.
Mm-hmm.
And I was watching Andre Soccer Studies video that he did with Brian from Sunday League Investors. And something that Brian said, like the question was basically like, what does the market need? Like, what do we need in this market? And I think Brian said something, to paraphrase, like, we just need more different types of content.
Yes.
And something about that like just really resonated with me, because I've always been so kind of like self-critical, like nobody's gonna want to hear this, nobody's gonna want to care what I have to say. But I started thinking about like, well, what kind of content would I have wanted or as I was coming into the market? Because I think a lot of content that I consumed, at least when I got in, you mentioned Sports Card Investor, it's a lot of like, hey, I'm at this show, I'm spending $30,000 on these cards. And I'm like, well, that's like not, attainable for me.
It is actually, I'll jump in here. It is actually funny. If you go back and look at Sports Card Investor's older content, it was actually, I'm talking like 2018, 2019 kind of content. It was actually pretty data driven and talking about educational aspects of the market. And then as we moved into 2020, 2021, when the hobby went on its hype phase, he started more focusing on what I would call the entertainment side of the YouTube space for card content. These are guys like Card Collector 2, where he does a show and he does trade nights and you watch the vlogs, or Sports Card Investor now does that. Brian Sunday League Investors, his content has really shifted that way to vlogs, storytelling, and shows. I think that's a whole separate subcategory of the market. And believe me, I watch it all. I mean, I love that. I love putting it on in the background as more of like a podcast sort of thing. I'll listen to it and then maybe I'll go back and I'll watch it and see the deals that are happening. But it's comfort entertainment content. I don't expect to learn a lot from it, but I love seeing what people are talking about in the market. I just love seeing what the buzz is. And so I look at that completely differently to the type of content that, say, an Andre soccer study does, because prior to him being in the space, I really wasn't that interested in creating content myself, because I'm not somebody that goes to a bunch of shows and does all this vlogging type stuff. But when he just had PowerPoint presentations and he would take you through the fundamentals of the market and why things do what they do and his predictions for what would happen in the near and long-term future, I thought that sort of stuff was really, really interesting. And so I was binge watching his content back when he had like 20 subscribers. And so that sort of content really appealed to me. And so after about a year, I had gotten a pretty decent following from being friends with Brian and being on Instagram and going to a few shows, that I thought I might as well go ahead and do my version of what Andre Soccer Study does, and try and do sort of the same thing he does. And then as I started doing more content, I thought to myself, I'd love to do what Andre does for pre-modern and vintage, but do it for like ultra modern side of the market, because I don't think the ultra modern side really has that technical fundamental aspect to it. It's more of the hype driven entertainment content. So if I could add something more fundamental to it, I think that's super interesting. And then obviously on top of that, I'm trying to do this is how you can sell a card, this is where you can buy cards, and that sort of end of the market so people can engage better. And so I think that's just something that you go through as you mature as a content creator. And so, like you say, your videos right now are more on the educational side, and that's what appeals to you. And I can definitely relate to filming your first video on OBS or whatever you're using and thinking to yourself as you upload it, man, it'd be really cool if like 7 people watched this or something like that. And I remember having 14 subscribers after a few videos, and now I can, just this morning I uploaded a video and it has already 300 views or something silly. And I'm like, that's crazy that 300 people want to listen to what I have to say. And so that sort of stuff is really motivating. And I know as you go down the road and build that content creation, you'll also get to that point where it's like, hey, I remember when I had 12 subscribers and 10 views on my videos, and I thought that was a pretty good day. And so it's just something that comes with being a content creator. And so, yeah, no, it's really cool. And so if you want to talk a little bit more about where you see yourself, even in your first few weeks doing content, where do you see the maturation process, or what is something that when you started making content, you realized maybe I need to shift a little bit?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess just to like kind of like finish the thought. So like to be clear, like the sports card investors, Sunday League investors, like I'm with you. I love that stuff. Like not only is it
I could not do it, but I love it.
I think it's the highest, like it's probably the most entertaining content. And I think seeing people sort of in their natural element, whether it's a show or dealing with different cards, you sort of pick up indirectly on some, like there's a knowledge transfer there. It's not necessarily like, hey, I'm presenting this information to you, but there's a knowledge transfer of just like hearing people talk about things or hearing how they talk about thinking about deals that I think is absolutely valuable. But yeah, exactly. So when I started, I was like, well, I don't really go to shows. I don't have like tens of thousands of dollars that I can just go like drop on stuff. So then I started thinking about like, well, what type of content, would be helpful for me. And I kind of just tried to start making that type of content. And one thing that I've always liked to do is I like the idea of like starting with like a bankroll, whether it's like daily fantasy sports or poker or something like that, where you start with a bankroll. It's almost like a game, right? It's almost like a fun game that you can play to see like, okay, I'm going to try and like flip this. And it's not necessarily about making money. Like, it's not like I'm not going to go make like a living off like doing this. It really is more of like a game with like, as we mentioned, like a goal, an intended goal at the end. And so I think I just started thinking about like, okay, well, what if I like chronicle that journey? Because, a lot of times you see the culmination of these big deals at these shows because that's honestly it's entertaining, but you don't really see, I guess, the grind that kind of gets somebody from the beginning to potentially getting to that point. And that's kind of what I wanted to try and do with my channel. And I think one thing I realized just in the first, I don't know, like month and a half I've been doing this is like people really like grading reveals and like mail days. Like they want to see what you're buying. They want to see like like you mentioned, I did like a grading reveal and I was like, I had like, I don't know, 20 subscribers. I'm like, okay, this will get like 20 views. And all of a sudden it was like over the course of a couple of days, I had like 150 views. I'm like, holy crap, like who's watching? Like this is insane. And then I
Grading
did
reveals and like PSA submission content is the ultimate comfort content in my opinion. I love having that just like on up on a second stream when I'm doing something for work or I'm doing whatever, when I'm researching the market. PSA reveals and PSA submissions, those are like the best comfort content in my opinion.
Yeah, and so then like I think I did another analysis, sort of more like analysis type video of like, hey, I'm gonna do this deep dive and just like look at pop reports and talk about just like some opinion I had.
Mm-hmm.
And not only did that get like probably the lowest amount of views in the last like month, but I'd even had like I had like people like like disliking it, you know. So I'm just like, okay, so I think you kind of start to get a sense of what content like really reaches the masses or that people want to watch, and I think that's important. That's not to say that you have to like change all of your content to match that, but I think it's good to know like, okay, it's good to have certain types of content because that's going to help drive views and drive traffic and drive attention to my channel versus like the content that I would say is probably more like value added, that like once people are here now they can consume that and they can, you know, and more like evergreen stuff that as people are starting out they can see like, okay, how do I do X? Like, how do I do grading? Or like, how do I buy cards on this website or whatever? And so I'm kind of trying to, you know, to balance both of those while also, you know, trying to grow a channel. So
how many times have you created a lecture or a presentation and just not used it?
That's a good question. Probably a handful of times, like I'll just scrap it. And then in addition to that, I probably have about 5 that are just in process right now.
Yep.
That I have that they're like ready to go, except for like a couple slides, and I just can't. It's almost like a story. Like I don't know how to finish it, or I don't know like how to like connect the dots. So I have a few of those going on right now, especially things that I want to be more informative and more. I'll call them like bulletproof, as far as like I don't want to just like ramble on about an opinion. Like I want to truly like, you know, dot my I's and cross my T's and make sure that like somebody stumbling upon this in, you know, a month or a year from now is actually getting value out of it and it's not like completely leading somebody astray.
Yeah, no, I completely get that. And I mean, I'll say I'd probably make my presentations in spurts, right? So I'll take a day and I'll go through 2 or 3 ideas. I'll probably burn 2 of them after making 4 or 5 slides, and then I'll save a few slides from one thing, and then one of them I'll end up being really inspired by, and I'll finish that in like a few hours or something like that. And I've always found that the content that does best for me is the presentation that I put together from start to finish, and I can say that was really fun. I had a lot of fun building that, and I think this is really cool. If it's something that I've put aside or one that I've had to come back to after a while, those are the ones I don't feel as confident uploading, and I don't think they come out as well. But for me, it's you pretty much know it when you have the idea. So, for example, the 2 best videos that I think are on my channel are the Darwin Nunez video and the one where I break down the ultra modern market and talk about specifically what sets I think are the best to target in the short and long term. And the reason, not only do they do really well in terms of the likes and in terms of the views and all that kind of stuff, and the people that DM me about those videos, not only is that, it's when I was making them, it felt different than making the other videos. It was like, this is really cool. I can't wait to share this sort of thing. Whereas with some other content I create or some presentations that I don't share, it's more, do I really want to have to sit through 20, 25 minutes talking about this?
Yeah, no, and I think you're touching on a key point. I think like authenticity is huge when it comes to content creation, because if you're not having fun and it's not coming through that you're enjoying what you're doing, who's gonna, like you said, who's gonna watch that and be like, oh, this is awesome. Like this guy doesn't seem like he wants to be here. So like, why do I want to be here, right? So I think that's super important. And I think it's also important not to like, you know, we all have our own sort of like personality and style and whatever. And it's important, even if there are similarities between different content creators or different types of content, like not being like, oh, so-and-so did that, or like these 5 creators did X, so now I have to do X, or these guys are doing this and now I have to do this. And I think, you know, I think it's important to have that diversity across everyone, because if everybody's doing the same stuff, it would get, I don't know, I think kind of boring pretty quickly.
Yeah, I will say that Andre recently though started putting his little webcam in the corner of his screen, so I'm taking credit for that, because I'm the originator of the lecture plus webcam in the Saga card market. So yeah, no, it's all good fun, and so I'll just close out this more content creation subject that we're on with, if anybody wants to get started making content, there's literally no rules to it, and like all you need, my setup is so easy. I just in case everybody wants to know, here's my setup. I have a microphone right here that I'm pointing to. So when I move my face here in all my videos, that's why I'm speaking directly in the microphone. I have a microphone right here. I have these like $5 earbuds, and I have my laptop with a webcam and OBS running on my laptop. And that's it. I have a second monitor on my right-hand side that I usually read off of or sometimes refer to, but it's really, really easy to start producing these things. OBS is super easy to understand if you ever want to film content off your laptop or do webcams and that sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, it's super easy to do. So I would encourage anybody that has any interest in wanting to do content, just go ahead and put it out. I think it's really rewarding, and I think it has better to me in the market itself doing content, because it forces you to build content that you can put your name behind and be confident in. So I think content creation is really cool, and so I would encourage anybody to try it if that's something they're interested in.
For sure. And I would just say, like, yeah, you're probably going to suck at first, but you just keep going. You'll get better over time. Like, you get better by doing. And that's like something I had to overcome as well, is like, it's going to suck for a while. And then hopefully it starts getting better. And hopefully people don't completely abandon along the way.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't have like a preset template for my videos until 5 or 6 through. I didn't have like a process for doing thumbnails. I didn't have any of that. You sort of just build on it as you go. So like, go back and look at some of my first videos and look at the template that I'm using, and like look at the thumbnails I have. It's a completely different story. And I'm not saying my thumbnails are good now, they're trash, but I'm not saying it's really much better. But if you go back and look, you'll see the progression that I've made just from being from 5 subs to now a little bit over 500. It's been a journey. So if you're starting out, don't worry about it. It's just part of the journey. We're all going to have bad thumbnails and bad videos. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and move on to the next topic here, which is talking about short-term and long-term and how that changes your strategy. And I touched on this a little bit in one of our first segments where we were talking about how we look at our long-term goals. And so for myself, in terms of short-term, I look at that as the ultramodern market. That's my short-term territory. And I try and use that to build into the long-term territory, which is what I consider pre-modern and the vintage sides of the market. In a very general sense, that's how I approach the market and my thoughts on it in a macro perspective. But I imagine your thoughts are pretty similar. But if you want to go into detail on that, you can do that as well.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would maybe add is, yes, they are similar. I would probably just add that, when you think about like short-term and long-term, like, again, kind of going back to the goals, it's like if you're playing in the ultra-modern market, and I guess I should caveat this, say like people can do whatever they want. Like, you should buy what you like, you should keep what you like and sell what you like whatever, right? Like, I'm not trying to tell people how to do things.
I want to touch on that recently because not recently, I'll touch on that for a second. On the podcast that I did with Andre and Troy and Brian from Sunday League Investors, Al El Rey left a comment saying that based on what I had said in the podcast, that I would hate his collection that he's curated. And I'll go ahead and say, just in case he's watching it, no, that's not what I'm trying to say at all. When I make comments saying things like, I think it's in your best interest in the long run to specifically just target Messi, Maradona, Pele, and Ronaldo, I'm not saying literally ignore everybody else in the market and just buy those things. I'm saying from an investment thesis perspective, I think that's the best route you can take. I do not want people to literally not buy things that they're not interested in, or specifically only do certain things. No, I mean, it's a hobby and a collecting and investing experience if you want to make it that. So when I do say things like you should be targeting this or you should be doing this, don't take it so literally. It's more of like a theory, a perspective sort of thing. I'm not literally telling you, hey, you want to buy Iniesta, don't do it. Like that's silly.
Yeah, plus I don't understand how anybody could dislike Al's collection. That's like one of the most legendary things I've ever seen.
No, Al's collection is absolutely insane.
Yeah, so I guess, the only thing I'll say about the short-term, long-term is know what short-term means and know what long-term means. And what I mean by that is, like, long-term is not like between now and this World Cup. Like, long-term isn't 6 months, right? Like, long-term is like decades. And so if you're buying, ultra modern and you're like, I'm gonna, hold this like long term, just understand that, like, in the long term, like most ultra modern, especially prospects, like I don't want to say go to zero, but you know what I'm saying? Like, there's hype cycles, right? And you kind of have to time the hype cycle if what you're trying to do is like buy and flip, if that's what you're trying to do. If you are just like a huge collector of, Cole Palmer, and you're just like, no matter what happens with this guy, like, he's my PC. Like, yes, by all means, you should collect him. You should do whatever you want. But just know that, like, just because you buy a player or buy a card doesn't mean you have to hold it through multiple like potential peaks or hype cycles, there are exit and entry points. And so just keeping that in mind and knowing like short term is very like, I would say like less than a year, and long term is probably like greater than 5 years, and everything between that I would consider more like medium to intermediate term.
Yeah, so I'll say just as a general rule for myself, when I'm doing transactions or buying cards for the ultra modern side of the market, I'm not thinking in any further than basically a year. A year would be my maximum hold period for anything ultra modern. So when I'm targeting buying something, when I buy it, a raw or a graded or any of that stuff, I'm not planning on holding it more than a year. When I'm going to more to the vintage and pre-modern stuff, I'm talking about literally like locking that away and not looking at it for 10, 20 years. If it's like a true grail piece and not something that I'm just going to try and upgrade from to a higher grade, that's something that you just lock away and you don't even think about it. And so that's how I sort of separate the two markets. When I'm thinking about ultra modern, I'm thinking about this probably won't be in my possession more than a year.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I agree with that.
All right, perfect. Next subject right here is going to be talking about opportunities in focusing on vintage versus pre-modern versus ultra-modern. And in here, you give the example of bonds, stocks, and crypto. I think that in a general sense is a pretty good example of how the three different markets work. But if you want to expand on that, I'll let you start with this one.
Yeah, and I don't mean those to be like 100% analogous. It's more just like it kind of to what we were just talking about. It's like, I kind of look at vintage as like, and even some like, more ultra modern stuff is more kind of more like steady and stable in the sense that like you could probably bank, to your point of like investing in like Pele, Maradona, Messi, you could probably bank on those appreciating over the long run. Yep. You're not going to necessarily have 100x, but you could feel pretty confident that it's a high floor and you'll likely, appreciate in value. Mm-hmm. Whereas, some of the, on the other end of the spectrum, ultra modern, that's kind of where it's more volatile, where you could have like 100x if you invested in Darwin Nunez a year ago. Yep. And graded, and we're kind of early to that market dynamic. Whereas a lot of these ultra modern cards, as we just mentioned, will end up not, going or trending near zero, or at least, kind of tapering off. So I think it's just, understanding like when you're investing in different eras, like kind of what the dynamics of those eras are, and the volatility involved, and then how that influences your like risk reward framework that in your risk tolerance.
Yeah, and so an interesting thing that can happen with both vintage and pre-modern, right, is they're not necessarily these good solid trends over time. I mean, you see it as well in vintage and pre-modern. You'll get spikes like randomly. Maradona is a good example. His stuff has been spiking recently. It's not something you would traditionally expect, but when it comes to a vintage card with low pop, it doesn't take a lot of interest for that to sort of spike. So things are, I would say, even more volatile on the ultra modern side. But if you're looking for volatility, I mean, there's still volatility. We're in a super speculative market, so there's always going to be volatility. There still is that volatility on the vintage and pre-modern side as well. But your floors that you're playing with should be a lot higher. I mean, a Messi rookie should have a much higher floor than these super ultra modern volatile prospects that are like 19 years old and play a few games a week, that sort of thing. So at least from that perspective, I think you can. There are situations with specific cards where you get the best of both worlds, where you have Maradona vintage releases that can spike, and as well as having a high floor. And so that's specifically why I like vintage and pre-modern, especially as we go into the long term. I think those population reports, if they're playing out right now, I think that plays out even better when the market gets bigger.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that the key point there too is that some of the ultra modern volatility can happen, whether it be like transfers or hype or player performance. And a lot of the vintage volatility is more market driven, like market as a whole. So like a lot of the recent peaks was because in the last couple of years, like the soccer card market had, quite a boom, throughout 2021.
Yeah, I had a whole presentation. I was working on this. I never produced it because I don't think I could ever get it quite right with what I was trying to say. But the basic of it was, if you're investing in vintage and pre-modern, you're only worried about fighting on the market of the market itself. Whereas if you're investing in the ultra modern side, you're fighting on the performance front, the transfer front, the injury front, as well as the market front on top of that. So you're just exposing yourself to a lot more risk factors there.
Yeah. Yeah. I would completely agree with that.
Alrighty, so with that, we'll go ahead and move on to the next topic here, which discusses how you factor in current events, transfers, rumors, upcoming milestones, big matches, hobby events like the National, how you factor all that into your purchasing decisions, and then basically what do you look at all these different things for? So I know personally in my experience, in the ultra modern market, this is really what drives, besides the market conditions in general, this is what really drives the ultra modern market. It's transfers and rumors, it's big match performances, and then upcoming milestones to a lesser extent. But I'd love to get your opinion on all the different factors and how you sort of look at them.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit on it. Like, there's definitely what I would call like hype events that are like drivers of hobby, value or just attention, I would say. And I think there's a couple things I would point out here. One being that, like, yes, if a player is performing well or is being hyped up for a transfer, that will drive attention, that will drive speculation, that will drive hype, and along with that drives, potential values. I would say that value is sort of multiplied or exacerbated by an instance, as we talked earlier, where you can find a rookie or a prospect that doesn't have many rookie cards. Mm-hmm. So like if you're able to find that person and then there's also a hype event, then you kind of have more of like a perfect storm. The other thing I would also say is, as the market matures and gets more in tune to what these hype events are, the hype event starts becoming sort of like the pre-hype event. So it's like, oh, we have to, like, it's not about this guy getting a transfer. It's about the hype of him getting a transfer. And then it's like, well, what would go into the hype of, so it's almost like reading the tea leaves to like get ahead of the potential hype event. It's similar, like I would compare it to other sports markets where everyone's like, oh, I need to buy players who are going to be in the playoffs because then they have a chance to like win a title. And then by the time you get to like the NBA finals, for example, like anybody who's in it, like their card, that's already priced in.
Everything's tanked. Yep.
So it's kind of like that, where it's like, I do think that there are like hobby drivers. Anytime where there's going to be attention on soccer cards in general, specific players, specific teams, whether it be like the Champions League final, that's always going to drive attention. But I think as this market has started to mature, I think people are kind of trying to get ahead of that a little bit, knowing that hype will kind of build towards those events.
Yeah. So the market in general has this spotlight, right? And at any given time, the spotlight can shift to one thing or another, but there always will be a spotlight on something. It just matters what's really trendy or what prospect is in at the time. And so at least at the National, the spotlight was brightly focused on ultra high-end sets. So like Flawless, Eminence, Noir, that sort of stuff. The spotlight was on that, at least for the National. The spotlight can shift all the time, depending on player, market condition, all kinds of stuff, but there's pretty much always a spotlight. And so the goal is to try and figure out not who's in the spotlight right now, it's where the spotlight's going to go next and what could be the next event that triggers that spotlight. So something that got foiled in terms of the way people sort of tried to understand the market initially was we had the Michael Jordan documentary that came out during COVID, and Michael Jordan cards went insane when that happened. And so every subsequent documentary that was released after that, the one thing you heard every single channel talking about was you need to buy Sammy Sosa, Mark McGwire for the Sammy Sosa, Mark McGwire documentary. You need to buy Tiger Woods for the Tiger Woods documentary. You need to buy Magic Johnson for the Magic Johnson documentary. And you need to buy Neymar for the Neymar documentary. Every single time that happened, the cards were the most valuable, like months or weeks leading up to the documentary. Then when the documentary dropped, they all dropped like a ton of bricks because that's just not how the market worked. The way the market works is more based on the hype that starts building, not when the event is actually taking place, when it's already happened, because so much has already been priced in. So the best example that I think we can talk about right now for the soccer card market is what we've seen going on with Karim Benzema. Karim Benzema had a huge season and his card prices like 100, 300, 400x or whatever they did. And his prices went way up. Now, as we're moving into the Ballon d'Or season and the award season, his prices are dropping now. They're on a backslide. He hasn't played in a lot of games, but he's going to win the Ballon d'Or. It's pretty much all but confirmed. And so a lot of people on the market that maybe aren't as experienced in the market will say things like, oh, I'm going to buy Benzema now, or I bought Benzema at the top because he's going to win Ballon d'Or and then his prices are going to go up. Historically, that's not been the case in pretty much any other sport we've looked at. Unless the market is in a complete mania at that point, then everything sort of goes up. But in terms of trying to factor in an award like Benzema winning it, I highly doubt we see any sort of a bump because it's been priced in at this point. There's a reason Benzema prices are sliding back down right now. It's because he's not playing. Everything's already been priced in, and now the pop reports are catching up as more people are starting to grade him, as opposed to previously he didn't have a lot of graded slabs, but now more are coming to the market. He's not playing. There's not that constant spotlight on him anymore. And so when the Ballon d'Or ceremony does come, the people that had already bought his cards are going to now be trying to dump them because this was their exit point. So you got to, at least in the current generation of the market, the market's gotten a lot smarter than it was during COVID. And so people already anticipate these sort of things. So you got to keep thinking even one step further ahead than that. And so at least that's the most current example I could think of in this situation.
Yeah, and I think I would just add to that you talk about like what's priced in. And I think that's a really important point because it's not that a certain team winning a championship or winning a title can't move prices for players.
Correct.
It's just that it has to be a team that people aren't expecting. Like you have to almost find like a dark horse. It's the same with almost like, if you're betting on who's going to win, the World Cup, like you're going to get the worst odds on the favorites for a reason, because that's already priced into the expectations of those teams. Whereas a dark horse, you could get, the Cincinnati Bengals for American football is like a good example where they made it all the way to the Super Bowl. There was hype around Joe Burrow, but nobody really thought that they could win the Super Bowl. So that as they made that run, his card market sort of elevated a bit. And I think, when you think about the World Cup, for example, I know there's a lot of people, you see sometimes people talking about like buying for the World Cup. Like I think we're probably generally kind of late for that, at least in terms of like the favorites, because like Brazil, everyone expects Brazil to do well. England, like there's those handful of teams, Argentina. Whereas like if you bought a team like, I don't know, like Iran
Senegal.
or Senegal, yeah. And, where it's like, then they make a run. And, if you had purchased their kind of main players cards, months ago and got it at a cheap price point, there's room for those to run. But I think it's just important to kind of call it that. And same with transfers, right? Like big transfers to like Darwin Nunez going to Liverpool that people were already kind of expecting. And then it happened. Like that's like a hype event. But sometimes, players moving from like one Bundesliga team to another, like, okay, that's not really the transfer that like everybody's waiting for. And so like maybe there is like a bit more for those players' cards to grow when they do finally get that bigger transfer.
Yeah, you saw. So the best comparison I can make with transfer hype there is what exactly we saw in this past year with Darwin Nunez transferring to Liverpool. His market goes up, and then as he transfers to Liverpool, it doubles again. If you look at a guy like Dusan Vlahovic, his market goes way up. Then he transfers to Juventus. His market stayed exactly the same and then started dropping. There is a lot that needs to happen right for the transfer to increase the hype. So even Vlahovic going to Juventus is one of the best clubs in Serie A, one of the biggest clubs in Serie A, but the market really doesn't care about Serie A. It's probably, of the top 5 leagues, it's probably the least followed at this point in our market structure. So if he would have gone to Arsenal or Man United or Man City or any of these other clubs, he probably would have seen a similar situation to what happened with Darwin Nunez, where the transfer doubles his prices again. But since he went to Juventus, his prices pretty much stayed the same, and there was no more built-in hype because Juventus really isn't all that hyped. And so as we start talking about more specific players, I know I recently did a bunch of Instagram polls of, I believe, 15 different prospect type transfers that happened in this window. And I had people rate on my Instagram story on a grade from A to D, how good was this transfer for their card market? And so if they got an A, that means this was the best possible transfer for their card market. If they got a D, this was the worst possible transfer for their card market. And so I could go through some examples. Well, let's start off with Benjamin Sesko, right? So Benjamin Sesko, if you don't know, he is confirmed to transfer to Leipzig in 2023. So he's going to stay at Salzburg for the full 2022 season. And then in 2023, he's confirmed to go to Leipzig, and he'll sign a 5-year contract or whatever it is, and then transfer after a few years, because that's just what happens with these guys, as long as he plays well. So at least in my opinion, I would go against what the general market said, because I believe in my poll, almost unanimously, everybody had that either as an A transfer or a B transfer. I actually think that's one of the worst possible transfers for Benjamin Sesko's market, specifically because he now has absolutely no chance for somebody to FOMO into buying him. Somebody can't go to Benjamin Sesko's market as he's doing something for Salzburg and say, oh man, this guy could transfer to Manchester United or Manchester City and be their star striker, because he's already tied to Leipzig. And Leipzig, as a club, I mean, yeah, it's a great opportunity for him. Don't get me wrong. I think he's going to do very, very well, and that's a great move for his career. But for his cards, we don't really care as a market right now about Leipzig. I mean, you can look at a guy like Nkunku, who had one of the best seasons of any player in the world last year, and his Sapphire rookie cards are less than $5. Benjamin Sesko's, I think, are going for between 30 and 50 right now. And so even if he is like an all-world talent at Salzburg and then at Leipzig, I just don't see where the hype's going to come from. If he would have stayed put at Salzburg, I think that would have been much, much better for his hype cycle in the market, because then we could get to the January period. And if he's banging in goals for Salzburg, everybody's going to be like, oh my God, he could transfer to Bayern Munich. He could transfer to Dortmund. He could transfer to Man City, Man United, all these other big clubs, Chelsea. But now it's, yeah, he's doing really well at Salzburg, but he's going to stay there for the full year, and then he's moving to Leipzig. So I just don't see that as a great move for him, specifically for his cards.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other key, is that it's not even like he's transferring this summer and then it's like, oh, we have to wait a year or two until he has more transfer hype. It's like, he's just stayed there, and now we have to wait a year till he goes to his new team.
Yeah.
And then,
then you're going to wait on that.
Yeah. And I think in a way it might give people opportunities if they are, long-term believers in him. But in terms of his short-term hype cycle, it's kind of more of a parallel move, I would say, than it is like an up. I mean, for his career, it's probably great, but from like a card standpoint, it's not. It's almost like, I think people were probably almost pricing in either a different transfer, or at least like a different type of transfer hype than what than like transferring to a relatively similar team a year later is kind of almost like, to your point, like maybe kind of like the worst of all worlds in terms of a transfer.
Yeah, I mean, it really pauses his market for this season and the following season, because even if he's lights out at Salzburg, I just don't know where the hype's going to come from, because he's going to Leipzig. It's already been confirmed. I don't know who's going to FOMO into a striker that's transferring to Leipzig. So it's unfortunate for specifically his card market. But if you're somebody that is long on Sesko, and long, I mean, like you want to sit on it for 24 months instead of 12, then I think there's going to be some interesting buying opportunities, assuming his career plays out as we all expect it, because I don't think there's going to be a lot of hype on him. And there's always another guy in the line, right? As we move forward, there'll be another striker that comes up probably in the same team in Salzburg. They'll probably have another striker behind him that's probably going to get even more hype, because whoever it is going to be a free transfer basically to go anywhere, rather than sit there and then go to Leipzig. So that's just my opinion on his market. I don't think that's a good move for him. But I mean, there's guys that I think got great moves. I mean, Darwin Nunez, dream transfer. Erling Haaland, dream transfer. Although I don't think it's as great of a dream transfer for Erling Haaland, just because so much is already priced into his cards. We talked about just recently things being priced in and expectations. I just think the expectations are so high for Haaland right now that for his prices to increase on the majority of his market, I'm not talking about the ultra high end, because that stuff can still be volatile just based on the super wealthy people that are playing in that market. But the everyday man's market for Haaland, I don't know what he has to do for it to really increase that 20, 30, 40, 50%, or let alone go up 200%. It's going to be a lot of work.
I think between just his cards aren't specifically, scarce, like his rookie, what people consider his rookie cards. He has stickers, he has multiple different cards people consider rookies. So it's not like you have the scarcity, supply aspect working in the favor of rising prices. And then from a demand standpoint, I think he'll always be in demand, just as one of the, he's young, he's one of the best players in the world. He's going to be playing for like the best team in the world. He's probably going to score a ton of goals. But I mean, he could score 50 goals, and I don't know that changes his price, materially. I mean, I think everyone's kind of assuming City's going to win the Premier League. They'll probably be in the final four of the Champions League, and he'll probably lead them in goals and may very well win the Premier League Golden Boot. And what does that do for his market? He's not in the World Cup, so he's not going to have that, hype event or ability to sort of like further his legacy on like an international stage. So it's kind of like, what could he possibly do other than scoring, I don't know, 100 goals? And I don't know.
It's an interesting situation where somebody that hasn't bought Haaland needs to see something from Haaland this year that makes them go, oh my God, I haven't seen that before. I need to now buy a Haaland card. And I just don't know what that is. See, when you move to a guy like, I won't use Benjamin Sesko because we just used him as an example, but I'm trying to think of a striker. Felix Afena-Gyan, right? He's the 18 or 19-year-old Ghanaian striker for Roma. If he scores 20 goals this season, which he's never going to do, obviously, but if he did, then you have a guy that has very few rookie releases, and he's not really priced that heavily right now because not a lot of people really talk about him outside of the one spotlight game he had last season. So if he scores 20 goals, that's a, oh my God, I need to have Felix Afeniyan stuff in my case. I need to have some inventory for him because I need it. And so that's an example of a guy. Now the risk factors are completely different, but he has the opportunity to increase 200, 300, 400% because it doesn't take a lot for somebody to not know who he is and then really want his cards. Whereas Holland, everybody already knows who he is. What does he have to do at this point to get somebody to buy his cards that didn't want them before?
Yeah, I would just contrast, with somebody like Mbappe, who I think was kind of the darling before Holland in the soccer card market. I think at least the investment case there was like, he's the next GOAT. He's young. He already won a World Cup. France is going to be at the next World Cup. So there's at least, like, whether you believe them or not, there's at least, built in like hype events. Whereas like with Holland, and I think Mbappe suffers from the same thing where what could he possibly do for his market to 2, 3, 10x?
Yeah, I think Mbappe and Holland are both in very similar situations in terms of their market outlook right now, and the built-in expectations and what they need to do to exceed those expectations is very difficult at this point.
Yeah, and I think on that point, I think Holland is going to have less types of opportunities to do that just because of the internet. I mean, now, I guess the flip side of that is if Norway somehow becomes more of a dark horse in the Euros or at the next World Cup, then all of a sudden you have basically almost like a Maradona effect where you have this guy like carrying this team on the international stage. And that could be something that does move the market. But now we're starting to talk about like, hypotheticals and more things. But that goes back to the point of like what's priced in. Like, I don't think people are pricing in a Norway run in the World Cup because I don't think that's a very realistic event.
Exactly. And that's a perfect situation to bring up because I think that's something that is specifically not priced into his market. So everybody, whenever you bring up Holland, if you talk to somebody that's not in the soccer card market, or you just talk to Holland, if you talk on Holland and Mbappe from a basic level, the same thing always got said. It was, they're very similar in terms of their talent, but Mbappe is going to play for France. He's going to be at the World Cup. He's going to be at the Euros. Holland plays for Norway. He's never going to do anything internationally because he plays for Norway. So if Holland does something with Norway, that opens the door to people that saw, wait a minute, I didn't realize that he is going to be this thing for Norway and Norway's going to be this good. That opens up a new avenue for new buyers to come in. Whereas Mbappe, everything has been priced in. I mean, we've been talking about at least Mbappe for 2 or 3 years at this point, and the narrative has always been he's going to be the best young player in the world. He then will be the best player in the world after Messi and Ronaldo are gone, and he's going to win 2, 3, or 4 World Cups. And so that's a lot that people were pricing into Mbappe so soon. And we've seen a pullback in his prices, not just because they were overpriced and so much hype was built into them, but the market in general was a bit overheated. But the point still remains that Mbappe's got to do a lot to exceed expectations at this point.
Yeah, no, exactly. I couldn't agree more. And so I think to kind of maybe put a bow on this, how we approach like transfers and rumors and stuff, I think it's important to kind of consider 2 things. Like, one, like what are those potential milestones and hype events? And then also ask yourself, like, which of those are currently priced into a given player's, growth path. And then similarly, like, okay, if you're going to optimize or try to plan for one of those hype events, thinking about like, what is the general market also doing to where like, am I following the market versus am I like sort of zigging when the market zags? And I think there's opportunities to kind of look where the market's not, or at least look there earlier than the broader market might be.
Yeah, in a very general sense, what I do when I look at ultra modern cards to buy raw to grade is I think to myself, the PSA return right now is 90 to 120 days, right? So if I'm buying something right now, I'm trying to think, where do I think the spotlight's going to be in 90 to 120 days? Now, there's things that I always think make sense to grade, like pre-modern inserts, Messi and Ronaldo stuff that you can find in good condition. You can grade that, I think, in any iteration of the market, and you should do well as long as you have your margins correct and you know what you're doing with grading. But when it comes to these younger kids and maybe even some more established guys that don't get graded as much, I'm thinking, where do I think the spotlight's going to be when I get these back from grading? And so that's a basic way I try and judge who I want to be buying in terms of that cycle.
Yeah, that makes sense. I wish I would have done that with all my basketball cards a year ago.
Basketball is a whole different mess that we would need a much longer podcast to talk about because that market has a long way to go. So without further ado, we'll move into the next topic here, which is what role can analytics and data play when targeting different players or cards? And so this is actually really topical because I think your most recent video touched on how you sort of use some very bare bones data and analytics to try and look at some prospects that people may not be looking at. But in case people didn't go ahead and watch that video, if you want to summarize it and then go into some more detail on what you're sort of looking at.
Yeah, so the video is basically just about a couple tools. Like as I was putting together another presentation I'm working on, I was kind of like, okay, maybe it'd be worth actually like walking through like how to use this stuff. And so basically what I do, I mean, you mentioned Transfer Market. I think there's a lot of good information on there where basically like it shows you what players are currently valued at. It shows you, statistics, it shows you their value history. So you can kind of get a sense of like, okay, for a given age group or like under 23 or under 21, who are the top 10, 20, 50, however deep you want to go, prospects in a given league. And then from there, I mean, if you want to just go one by one, then you can go to trading card database and look and see like, well, okay, how many different cards does this player have? And that's like a very high level way to understand. Obviously, the higher value someone is, I would, there's probably a correlation between like value and hype, not always, but like the higher value someone is, the more probably well known they are. But then also looking at that and triangulating that with how many cards do they have. And I think that's at least a very high level way to understand which players are potentially investable, at least from a scarcity standpoint. And then also thinking about everything we just talked about like where are they currently valued, what's their opportunity, what potential transfers and hypes do they have in the future. And you can kind of start piecing together different pieces of information to come up with like an investment thesis. And I think at a high level, what I try to do with just data analytics in general is come up with some sort of investment hypothesis, whether it's not always going to be right, frankly, but I think it's important to use data in such a way where if somebody were to ask you like, well, why are you buying this card or why are you investing in this player? It's not just like, oh, well, because I saw like so-and-so content creator mentioned him as one of the top 5 prospects to watch for the World Cup, right? It's more of a like, okay, I'm buying this player because he is a relatively high valued prospect in La Liga. He plays for Valencia. He gets a lot of run. He scores a lot of goals. And therefore, I think that there's a potential chance that this player could get some sort of hype transfer in the future. And oh, by the way, he's only in Obsidian. I just completely made that up. I don't know if there's a player that fits that category, but that's the type of like investment hypothesis I would think about. And then you can buy that player and you can see how it plays out. And then I think the key is then to revisit your assumptions and ask yourself, like, did I have any holes in these assumptions? Or is this something that's like repeatable that I can then repeat to other players?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think Transfer Market is probably one of my most used websites just in general when I'm looking for any sort of young player. If you haven't used the website, I would highly recommend at least getting used to it because it has everything you could ask for if you're trying to identify players, their values. It has statistics that go through every division that they've ever played in. So if they've been in U19s, if they've been in U21s, if they've been playing in the 3rd division of the Bundesliga, they have all the stats there for you. So if you want to dig that deep on all these young guys, you can. And I think that's awesome. Yeah, great resource there. So I highly recommend if you haven't checked that out and you're deep into the prospecting thing, I would go ahead and do that. I mean, me personally, like I said in one of our earlier questions, I will go through the full checklist when it's released and I will literally copy and paste everyone's name in a Transfer Market. So I know, at least in a general sense, who all these guys are and try and make targets based off that. So I think Transfer Market is the best resource there is for trying to identify prospects. And like you said, using trading card database or Beckett checklist, I personally like, you can use that, just type in their name and pull up what cards they have released. Gives you an idea on rarity and a few different things like that. But yeah, I mean, it's honestly not that difficult to try and find the data. It's a matter of how you use it. And so, like you say, coming up with an investment thesis, looking at the data, seeing if they score a lot of goals, if they reach the marks that you're looking for in terms of goal scoring, assisting, whatever it is you look for, age for their level, how young they were when they first started, all that kinds of stuff I think is really interesting. And it all comes together in that investment thesis like you talk about. And then I think one of the really important factors that people don't talk about enough is the potential for that player to get playing time. And I think that is the most, well, maybe not the most important thing. Talent's probably the most important thing, but the amount of playing time someone gets is so key, especially for young players, because that gives them the opportunity to have that one moment, that one spark that allows them to generate some market interest. So a perfect example of this right now is Brendan Aronson will start every single game for Leeds. Christian Pulisic will maybe start 20% of the games for Chelsea and feature and make 40% of the team's minutes or something like that. So Brendan Aronson is getting a lot of hype right now because he's going to play every single week. And so every single week he has the opportunity to put together a goal, an assist, a highlight, whereas Pulisic maybe once every 3 or 4 weeks has the opportunity to do that. And obviously Pulisic is the better player, at least think he's a better player at this point, but Aronson has so many more opportunities that's what makes him so attractive right now.
Yeah, and I mean, you want to talk about like what's priced in. I mean, if you ask like a random player or a random person that doesn't know anything about soccer, Christian Pulisic, and you ask them like, where does he rank in the world as far as like best players? I mean, that guy's got a lot priced in as far as just obviously the face of American. So I mean, it makes sense why, right? But it's just for him for his cards, I think to really appreciate and value. That's another one where it just would take, the US like winning the World Cup, basically.
Yeah, I think the US men's national team is a very special case that doesn't really follow a lot of the rules because specifically it is the biggest market. So the US market itself is probably, there's no way to check the data on this, but I'd assume that 60 to 70% of the transactions on the soccer card market are coming from the United States centric region. So for that reason, I think they don't necessarily follow the rules and fundamentals that the other players follow. So for example, when the World Cup comes to the United States and if the US does anything, all players are probably going to see a really good jump because the casual person that isn't even into soccer cards, maybe they're deep into basketball cards, maybe they're kind of into basketball cards, but they see this US team doing so well. There's a high likelihood that they probably want to look into some of these US players. And so you can acquire some casual fans and casual buyers that way. So, and I don't think that's something that is repeatable across different countries. So I think the US has a little bit of leeway there. If the team doesn't do well, I think it's a disaster and it's a house of cards at that point that comes tumbling down, but that's a whole different story for another day. But most players that are not US men's national team specific, I think follow fundamentals at a more reasonable and predictable way.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I think a bet on the US is like a bet on the soccer market in the US because if soccer becomes and this is actually something this is one of my presentations that's like on the back burner is it's sort of like imagining, I don't want to give too much away, but just like thinking through like what does that look like if soccer truly does ascend to be one of the most popular sports in the US and like how does that trickle through? Because I think the amount, I mean, you just look at like the World Cup, obviously not the last World Cup because we weren't there, but the 2014 World Cup, just the amount of hype within America around a team that frankly was, decent, but was never going to, contend for.
It wasn't even as good as the 2010 team.
Yeah. I mean, just the fact that they had a couple results that, got them to the, probably exceeded expectations. And yes. It was just the groundswell around that team. I mean, imagine if you had a team that was not only full of young players, young talented players that play all over the world, but then they're making a run to like the quarterfinals, the semifinals. I can't even imagine what that would do for just like soccer in America and just like, just the attention on a team like that.
Yeah, I am extremely bullish on this United States men's national team and what could happen over the next few years. That does not mean at all that you need to go out and buy a bunch of US men's national team cards, especially not now. I think you will have windows over the next few years where there'll be some good buying opportunities on some of the US men's national team guys, even guys like Pulisic, Weston McKennie, Giovanni Reyna, all these guys that are supposedly at this point going to lead the team in 2026. I don't think now is the best time to be buying them. I think there will be many opportunities in the lead up to 2026 where we'll have lulls in the market where you can make those plays, because something that has been talked a lot about more on the podcast that I've been on, and Andre's spoken about this recently as well. 2026 is a long way away. Like that is 4 years away. And so I don't think the people that are holding those cards currently are all wanting to stick out 4 years of market conditions, economy, and all that stuff just to hold this for the moment that might come in 2026. So I believe there is still a lot of time. Don't need to rush out and do it. But as we approach 2026, I'm very bullish on the U.S. men's national team.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess the last thing I would say about data and analytics is that we are operating in a market. I mean, it's a market, and markets have information and often incomplete information. And it's important to know that even if you're looking at transfer market and you're looking at trading card database and you're looking at pop report and you're kind of doing all the quote unquote right things, that doesn't mean that you have all the information. So I think it's always important to check your assumptions and make sure that, like it's sort of do almost like a post-mortem to be like, were all these assumptions sound? And if not, like, okay, what can I do better for next time? And just continue to refine that over time.
Yeah, you're going to make all kinds of mistakes in this market if you haven't already. The people that are watching this, I'm sure they understand that. You're going to make a lot of mistakes when you come to this market. I definitely have. And so it's just part of the learning process, and you'll use those mistakes to learn from them. And then you won't make those mistakes again in the future. I mean, I showed this on one of my previous presentations when I came to the market. I spent like $2,000 on raw Rodrigo, Vinicius Jr., and Kubo, like mega cracks and stickers. And when I was grading those, they looked like great sort of plays. And then when I got them back 6 to 12 months later, all those guys were completely off the map. This was before Vinicius Jr. had his huge season. This was when he was considered a bust after his first season. So I got crushed on that, like completely crushed. And so you take that and you learn from it, and you understand what you did wrong and what your investment theses were wrong there. And so you'll make those mistakes, and you'll learn from them as you go through.
Yeah, we all have our Spanish soccer sticker stories, horror stories that we can talk about.
For sure. As we move into this next topic here, this is going to be something that I think is really, really interesting. This is about being a knowledgeable fan, but having to think like a casual market participant. And I think this is really cool because when you're more of a hardcore fan, you really get into the weeds of specific players and what they mean to teams and the process by which goals are scored and all that kind of stuff. Whereas the casual market participants more see the goal tally at the end of the day. They see who makes the headlines based on media and all that kind of stuff, and the market reacts specifically to that and not necessarily how the process was made. So you have to sort of change your thinking in that way. Go ahead and expand on how you think at this point.
Yeah, so I think you hit on the head. It's, you think about which players are the most quote unquote important to teams. It's like when you're watching a soccer highlight, the last thing you see is the ball going into the net. You don't see the key pass that started like 3 passes before the pass that led to the goal. And so, or you think about just like what players have the most impact on like a team's success. So like one of my favorite players, Virgil van Dijk, is one of the best defenders in the world for Liverpool. And there was a run, I think back in 2021, where he was hurt, he tore his ACL, and they lost like 5 consecutive home matches. Like it was just a crazy kind of fluke thing, but it was because their defense was just completely in tatters. And there's like this crazy stat where he's never lost a Premier League home match that he started, and he's been on the team for like several years now. And it's just insane when you know the importance of a player like that. But in a soccer card hobby, yeah, sure, like hardcore fans are gonna be like, yeah, I like Virgil van Dijk, but a casual fan is gonna be like, well, this guy's like a defender, so immediately that just disqualifies him from any further consideration.
Yeah, no juice. They'd rather invest in some 12-year-old that's playing for Ajax's academy team.
Yeah, and similarly, I mean, a guy, you think of some of the like left backs, right backs, like more winger type players who are involved in goals. They do have a lot of assists, but because they play defender, that kind of immediately discounts them, at least in the eyes of like the broader hobby. And so you really do have to kind of think about more like, okay, if I was a casual fan, like what would grab my attention? Like if I wasn't watching, soccer every weekend, what would grab my attention? And it's going to be goals. It's going to be, flashy dribbling. It's going to be, it's going to be guys like Neymar. It's going to be like Ronaldinho. It's going to be like those types of players. And there's, plenty of examples of that, but those are going to be the players that like, if you think about people entering the soccer card market who don't have the knowledge that you or I might have as like a more dedicated fan, that's who they're going to gravitate towards. They're not going to gravitate towards Virgil van Dijk.
Yeah, I mean, highlight potential is a whole big factor that comes with the prospecting game that I don't think is talked about enough. So, for example, Jeremy Doku at the Euro, he had like 3 nice dribbles and his market 300% increased. Like, I mean, it was insane what happened with Doku's market, despite the fact he really wasn't scoring goals or assisting, but man, he had 2 or 3 really nice dribble highlights and people went berserk on him. And so that would never happen for a defender. It would never really happen for a midfielder. But there's always a chance if a guy has that flash and that ability that if he does something in an important game in an important moment, it can really, really boost his market in a way that could just never happen for guys that don't play that style.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I think like, starting off in the soccer card market, I was like focused on players that I liked, or, even like N'Golo Kante for Chelsea.
Perfect example.
He is like one of the most important players on the pitch every time he steps on the pitch, but he doesn't really score many goals. And he's just like that midfield engine, and he does a lot of the dirty work between the boxes. And if you weren't somebody who was like watching and like understanding and like getting in like the analytics of like expected goals and things like that, you would have no idea that he even exists.
Yeah.
And so I think it's definitely like a mindset shift that, if you're entering the market and making plays, you have to kind of think more like, I don't want to say like dumb it down, but you have to think more just of like, what is going to grab people's attention? Like what is worth watching?
Yep. What could capture someone's attention is much more important than, is this center back or center defensive midfielder going to help this team win a bunch of games? It's far more important, at least in the market's perspective, to do something flashy than it is to be an important piece that wins games that didn't do anything flashy.
Yep, for sure.
All right, perfect. Let me see where we're at here. Yeah, I think we talked about this just briefly in the previous section, but we'll go ahead and tie a bow on it here, taking advantage of stereotypes. So the stereotype of defenders or goalies is that you shouldn't invest in them. You should just ignore them completely and focus on players who score goals or are flashy. And we sort of touched on this, but I think in a sense, when you go back to the pre-modern and vintage area, I think that's a great area of opportunity. When you start getting into the historic and legendary players, I think it starts to matter a lot more because they're not generating highlights every day. There's no chance that those players reach the headlines. And so I think those are much more of a play than it is focusing on any of the modern keepers and defenders.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I mean, I think like people who have their legacy set, I think are more investable, at least like from like defenders, goalies, things like that. You could, I guess, theoretically do that with modern players, but then you're basically taking a bet on like who you think is going to be one of the best defenders or one of the best goalies of all time. And that's just, those are high bars to clear, especially for a modern player who's in the midst of their career. And
yeah, because they're
kind of need the
what you're really hoping for with a modern player is they have a moment that allows you to get a nice exit point. Exactly. Those moments are few and far between when you're talking about keepers and defenders.
Exactly. Yeah.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning into this podcast. This was actually the first half or first 2/3 or 3/4. It depends on what happens when I finish editing this, but this was the first part of the podcast that I recorded with Seth from Soccer Card Corner. So the other half or 1/3 or 1/4 of the podcast that is remaining will be on his channel, and I'll go ahead and link to it down below. Definitely be sure to check that out. We go over a few different topics that we didn't cover in full detail here, and I would really advise checking out his channel. I think he does some great work. Let's try and get him over. I think it'd be great if we got him over 100 subscribers here over the weekend. So check out his channel, give him a sub, give him a like, give him a comment, and I will see you guys in the other half of this podcast. And after that, I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks so much for checking it out.